So, thank you, Director Neira, for this really powerful message, really powerful lecture. I take home personally more or less two numbers, the 23%, I think, of premature deaths, just related to environment pollution and so on, which you quite rightly said is also a big opportunity because we can avoid that. And the last one was the 3.6% we only spend in our public health or in our medical service system on prevention, and the rest is just treatment, repairing things that have already gone wrong. So I think your lecture was full of powerful messages. So we have about 50 minutes or so on of discussion time, so I take, so you are the first.
Thank you. So a question regarding the figure of 250,000 deaths. It kind of comes across conflicting the catastrophic nature of what we're talking about in terms of climate change is affecting our even existence. So for the people who are dismissive or people who are undermining the enormity of this, they can say, well, 4.8 million are dying from injury, 9 million dying from non-chemical diseases, 2 million from just indoor biomass. Is there something wrong with the figure? Are we as epidemiologists maybe too narrow in linking everything else that is happening as a result of climate, and that this figure maybe is an underestimation?
Thank you very much for this extremely relevant question. In fact, that's why we are not using very often this figure of the additional 250,000 deaths caused by the climate change. First, because this is a very conservative way of estimating the very direct consequences of climate change in our health, and we were looking exclusively at some exposure and risk factors that we can measure on a very conservative way. We are presenting it normally the other way around, the 12.6 million deaths caused by exposure to environmental risk factors, and saying that climate change is aggravating and exacerbating all of them. But if you look exclusively at the climate change exposure on a very academic way, this is the excess mortality we are obtaining. The figure for our general population is the other one, is the 12.6 million on interventions that we can change. And in any case, there are interventions of common sense. I mean, ensuring access to safe water, who will disagree with that? Giving people the right to breathe safe air, who will disagree with that? And those are interventions that are not happening now. And the linkage as well with the climate change agenda is that most of the interventions that you need to put in place to mitigate climate change are those basic public health interventions that we are promoting. So I hope this answers your question, but sure that there will be more discussion around this epidemiology. This is not the one we are using to convince people about it. Yes, I agree.
No, thanks a lot for this, I think, appropriate answer. I take now two questions. The first one from Professor Frumpkin and the second from Academy President von Braun. So please.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria, for an absolutely spectacular talk, as always. I have a comment and a question, not about the content, but about your style, your communication style. Communications came up a fair amount this morning. You are, as you were today, always passionate, energetic, inspiring. If I visited you as my doctor, I would leave wanting to eat healthier food and exercise more right away. So tell us, if you would, about the best ways of communicating. Tell us about this style. Are there ways to teach our colleagues to talk this way to the public and policymakers? And in particular, what role do health professionals have in communicating the messages you just shared?
Okay, and also the next one, please.
Thank you also from my side for this insightful presentation. I have a more technical question. What you classify as environment, how do you separate it from a human behavior and from people's income or wealth. Looking at the global burden of disease statistics, there are 6 or 7 of the top 12 which relate to food and nutrition. And it's a complex mix of behavior, wealth, and that's also a WHO statistic. So how do you separate environment, and how do you define environment in this context?
Okay.
Both questions extremely relevant but challenging as well. Thank you, Frankie. It's just a question, being passionate and being Spanish is almost a kind of equal. I'm not Italian, but I'm Spanish, so passion goes with the genetic. I don't know, Dr. Albert, if you agree with that, but my genes are probably contributing a little bit to that. The question on how to communicate is the question that we are asking ourselves every day. Some people is telling us maybe WHO should declare a public health international crisis and a public health emergency. And we have been thinking about that. The problem is that the attention on the public health emergencies is what it is. It will take hopefully a few weeks, and then the attention will go down. So this is a battle that has to be maintained. We need to alert, but at the same time, as Jeffrey was saying, we need to provide solutions, because alerting might cause a paralysis and then a kind of disengagement on what is going on. Second, I think we did the click, as the French will say, a big change the day we started to communicate about air pollution in association with climate change. The day we were saying, you know, from an epidemiological point of view, it's not exactly a very perfect way of communicating, but there are a lot of commonalities, and 6.5 million deaths caused by air pollution, people see it. When you see the people in Beijing wearing masks and doing demonstrations because they are concerned by air pollution, that has changed a lot in the way people put pressure on environmental risk factors. So, how to communicate on positive? We start to propose solutions and engage mayors, and then saying, well, the mayor of London the other day was committing himself to reduce air pollution, and then publicly we will use any opportunity on positive approaches. I think, again, the urban solutions are and any time we have something positive and good to communicate, we will go for that. We are preparing as well for the health workers, health professionals to be better equipped to communicate. Until now, they felt a little bit disengaged and not part, because this is an environmental agenda. Now they have to communicate as if it was, and it is, definitely a very much health agenda. So much to say about communication, but many of ideas that we still need to explore. Regarding the global burden of diseases and WHO, yes, of course, the behavioral risk factors are still on top. If you look at them, the first one will be salt intake, and then blood pressure and tobacco consumption. Those are the behavioral risk factors. But when we look at the community risk factors and the collective risk factors, then indoor air pollution and outdoor air pollution are the first one. We can't combine the two because the sources are different, but if you put the two of them together, it will result on the biggest risk for health that we have at the moment. The methodology has been discussed with our colleague on the global burden of diseases and the global observatory, and this is an estimation using the definition of environment, as I say, in a very restrictive way, only those environmental risk factors for which we can quantify and really have an attributable fraction to the contribution of the burden of diseases. Thanks. So it's a way to communicate as well, the use of that.
Okay, I can take 3 more questions. So Andy Haynes has already raised his hand, then Dr. Estol, and then finally Suarez. Okay, thanks a lot. So we'll have these 3 questions, and then I have to conclude. So Andy, go ahead.
Thanks again for a great talk, Maria. I really wanted to ask about the food and agriculture sector because you didn't say much about that, but it's a very important driver of climate change. I mean, maybe 20, 30% of emissions. And of course, it also has major implications for human health. And the impacts of climate change on the food and agriculture system are also greatly concerning. So do we need to emphasize more the interrelationships between food and agriculture, both as a driving force for climate and other environmental changes, land use changes, for example, forest fires, land burning, agricultural fires, and so on, as well as the implications for human health? And of course, there are important co-benefits from moving towards a more sustainable diet, so lower consumption of animal products, increased fruit and vegetable consumption, also have major implications for NCD prevention. So I'm just wondering if we need to emphasize that in conjunction, of course, with these other messages around direct effects of air pollution.
So, Dr. Stoll.
Thank you, Dr. Neira. Discussing health and air pollution may be too general, perhaps, and it has been extensively published, and it has been our experience that people are very afraid of heart attacks and of having a stroke with the sequela of a hemiplegia and dementia. So maybe, since air pollution is a proven risk factor for these two diseases, stroke and heart attacks, like hypertension or diabetes, maybe focusing on that and the present risk of suffering those and increasing your risk of suffering those from air pollution may be more convincing than other arguments.
Thank you.
Of course, I want your opinion.
Thank you. Finally, Professor Suarez Orozco.
Thank you so much for your illuminating discourse and presentation. It was 150 years ago that in a furiously creative moment, as he was traveling from Bahia Blanca to Buenos Aires, Charles Darwin jotted down in the notebooks, educate girls, twice the effort, twice the impact. And this, of course, brings me to the matter of education. Education as the fundamental point of entry into addressing the long-term concerns over the future of the environment. It is children's curiosity that is the point of entry into their engagement with the scientific method. It is children's sense of ethical understandings that are at the heart of children making the environment, the move from the me and the mine to the we and the ours. So then when we talk about the banal matter of communicating the fundamental problems of sustainability as a long-term project for humanity, shouldn't then education be the epicenter of any agenda moving forward so that the next generation can use the environment as a point of entry into science and curiosity, into the ethical ownership of what is ours in the environment, in nature, and fundamentally in taking ownership rather than the passive response that is generated when these extraordinary abstract figures and numbers are given to us and are so difficult to metabolize. It is education, it is children that are our most significant point of entry into any long-term project for reversing the calamic race towards environmental destruction.
I guess the last statement was not a question, but in a way an encouragement, also in a way towards the future. But briefly, whatever you would like to answer to the questions raised now.
Thank you very much. And starting maybe by the end, how can I disagree? And being myself a girl, or has been a girl, I cannot agree more on the education of the girls. The problem is that some girls, they are not going to school because they need to be at home to transport, wood or something to cook, and spending 4 or 5 hours a day taking care of those. So if we can ensure access to clean fuels at the household level, that will allow many girls to go to school and to get education. That it will be fantastic. So it's obviously a circle that everything is very much related to poverty and the lack of education, but I fully agree with you, cannot agree more. Then on the arguments for stroke and cardiovascular diseases, we are changing the way we are communicating. Until now, the non-communicable diseases, the NCDs community, has been focusing on the 4 risk factors, the individual behavioral risk factors. Don't smoke, don't drink, don't be obese, and don't be sedentary, which is good. We need to focus on those risk factors. But unless we go as well to other risk factors which are not depending on your behavioral approach, but that are the community, like air pollution, we will not solve the problem of the non-communicable diseases. So we are trying in WHO. There are 2 communities, the one looking at the primary prevention approach and the one looking at maybe a more medical approach to the public health challenges. But I think that now with these messages on air pollution, we are moving to what you are proposing. Andy, I fully agree with you. On my presentation, yes, it's true, I didn't focus on that, but sustainable food production and consumption is a key pillar of those opportunities that we are proposing, and definitely one of the key sectors with whom we need to develop all of this strategy for our sustainable food production and therefore better nutrition and contributing to the reduction of non-communicable diseases. Thank you for the opportunity.
Let's thank the speaker again for a wonderful intervention. So I think this has been a fantastic morning session. And let me just take home 3 messages, if you like. So the first one is, this was about the broader context. We had a fantastic tour d'horizon and tour de force from the overall notion about evolution on this planet.